Hello and welcome everyone to our thematic webinar by the International Water Association in commemoration of International Women's Day 2026, where we continue to celebrate courage and contribution of women worldwide in building a better world. The webinar is co-organized by the fellows of the IWA and Grand Force Youth Action for SDG 6 Fellowship. I'm Monica Ndagire, a Quality Control Officer working with National Water and Sewerage Corporation Uganda. I'm an environmental scientist with a strong focus on water quality, environment, and public health protection. I'm your host for this session. Today's webinar is titled Women on the Frontline, Serving Communities Across Borders. In this conversation, we will celebrate the stories of some remarkable young women who have taken up community service in their communities and across national borders. The speakers will reflect on their work in the field, the challenges they've faced, including any gender-specific barriers, and how they've overcome them, and the personal and professional rewards of their contribution. I have the privilege of introducing the moderator for our session, Ms. Annika Eriksson Pearson. Annika is a Swiss-based independent professional facilitator and community organizer. She currently manages 2 communities of practice on environmental peace building and on business and conflict. Annika previously served as the community management lead at the Geneva Peace Building Platform and has worked with nearly a dozen of NGOs over the past 10 years. I now hand over the proceedings to Annika.
Thanks so much, Monica. You know you're in good hands when the webinar starts off with 2 speakers with rhyming names. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's really a gift to be here with you today, as Monica said, to celebrate stories of women on the front lines. I have a few housekeeping points to cover before we get into the juicy parts of our discussion. As you see on the screen, this webinar is recorded and made available on demand on the IWA Connect Plus platform for members. Our speakers have been responsible for securing any copyright permissions for work they present, of which they're not the legal copyright holder. And we're going to be telling a lot of stories about ourselves today. And so I think there's less concern about that, but just to put it on your radar that they very much have that responsibility, which means that you can share the information that you hear, that you learn, that you see, that you interact with. Can we go to the next slide? And interact, we hope you do. There are 2 options for interacting with us on this webinar on the Zoom webinar platform. First, you have the chat box, and I'm loving that I'm already seeing a couple people type in the chat and introducing themselves. I was going to ask you to do exactly that. We'd love to see who you are and especially where you're zooming in from. I'm always inspired to see the sort of international nature of where everybody's coming in from across the world. So please do use the chat box for general requests, for any type of interactive activity that I'll put in. But if you want to ask a question of our panelists today, I'm going to ask you to send those questions with the Q&A box. We have the opportunity using Zoom technology to both address some of your questions in a question and answer segment, but then also type responses as well. So if you have questions, feel free to put them there and we'll either try to respond to them by voice or again, typing. Can we go to the next slide? Awesome. All right, so this is our agenda today. We had our intro from Monica, and then we are going to spend some good time in a panel discussion. Then we will have space for Q&A. But again, inviting you to kind of get those questions coming in as we go along. And then finally, we'll turn over for closing remarks. I want today, even though we're using a webinar format, to feel as much like a conversation as humanly possible, as much as we can. I do want to introduce our speakers for today's discussion. Chelsea Hayward is a process engineer with varied experience working on water and wastewater projects in Australia and overseas. She's currently on an Australian Volunteers Program assignment with Engineers Without Borders in Cambodia, supporting WASH projects. Michaela Chan is a chartered civil engineer and a young expert at the Asian Development Bank, providing support and working with the Department of Water Resources in Vanuatu. And Uyen is a climate entrepreneur and renewable energy leader, advancing gender inclusive, community driven climate solutions. And Uyen is so often out of Wi-Fi reach that I'm actually not sure if she's here yet, and I will check in on that. But we may have her kind of coming in and out of the conversation. I'm sure everybody can relate to challenges that come with Wi-Fi connectivity. All right. Thank you again for participating in this poll. I'd like to invite our panelists, again, Wi-Fi permitting, to go ahead and turn your cameras on and therefore join me on the webinar stage. When your cameras are on, everyone can see you, of course. And I'm going to start with Michaela Chan. Uh, can you please describe the Young Expert Program by the Asian Development Bank and sort of the role that you're playing in your posting in Vanuatu? And then I'm curious maybe to kind of take it to a second level. As a woman serving in a community that is significantly different from the one that you grew up in, what are some of the challenges that you face and how do you navigate them? Over to you, Michaela.
Thank you. So, as a bit of background, I'm currently working with the Asian Development Bank in Vanuatu in the South Pacific, as part of like their pilot Young Expert program. So, the Young Expert program was developed by the Netherlands Water Partnership, and the aim is to bring together young professionals in the water sector from firstly the Netherlands, but that's expanded to a broader remit, with someone working on the ground in a community and really like fostering a collaboration between two young professionals and allowing that knowledge sharing and growth together. So this was the first time that the Asian Development Bank had actually done this, and now they've expanded the program to a few other young experts across Asia. And yeah, the idea is that not only does it build this great network of young professionals working in water, but it also like builds leadership skills as well as giving us mentoring in the space and the chance to work directly within an institution like the Asian Development Bank, which, as many people know, probably isn't as good at engaging young professionals as some others. Um, but yeah, in terms of my actual role, I'm working directly within the Department of Water Resources in the Vanuatu government. I provide technical assistance, which means that I'm supporting them on everything to do with like running day-to-day operations, designing new water systems, working closely with the local engineering team to build capacity, strengthen like resilience in water systems as well as the governance side of things. So something I've been working a lot on is like design standards. So the work is a nice mix of like technical tasks and institutional strengthening, but I think definitely it's been a really good learning experience for me. I think a lot of the time when you think of someone going from like a quote developed country to another is that you'll be there teaching them, which I think is what my colleagues thought would happen when I arrived. But like most of the time, I think the learning goes the other way. I've learned so much about how decisions are actually made in small island contexts and how water governance actually plays out in real communities. And I think I've done a lot more like with people on the ground than I'd ever done working in the UK before this. So it's been a really good way to see how engineering policy and like culture intersect. Um, and then on your second question about challenges working in the field, obviously working across cultures means navigating different expectations, communication styles, but also power dynamics. And I think it's true in whatever context, but especially when you're a woman working in a technical field and in a culture that is very paternalistic and male dominated. And I think in conversations with a lot of women who've worked in the space, I've realized that like I've had moments that were uncomfortable or inappropriate, and every woman that I know has also experienced that, or some version of it. And I think that we shouldn't stigmatize it, or like whisper about it and talk about it in the background as if it's something that we should be ashamed of. Because I think for me, like knowing that it happened to a lot of people kind of lit a fire in me to change the way that things are done, but also just made me feel less alone. And it reminded me why safeguards and supportive systems matter, and like being able to contribute to that and making sure that other people are having a good time. Um, and then I guess less specifically about being a woman, there's also the deeper layer for me around like colonial histories and the legacies that they leave in institutions, as well as in gender norms. So in Vanuatu, people are still very connected to their custom, which is like the traditional belief systems and way of living. And it's been a great experience learning how to show respect for this while also recognizing that these systems have been shaped over time by like missionaries, religion, Western thought, and that can also shape who gets heard, who gets access, and like who feels safe in an environment. So yeah, I think the whole experience has taught me a lot of humility. I think grounding yourself in understanding that you should be listening more than you speak and building good relationships with colleagues and community members to help understand the cultural landscape, and recognizing that feeling uncomfortable isn't a failure, but it's actually just part of the work.
Thanks so much, Michaela. It's really fascinating to hear more about your experiences, and I've already started taking, I'm realizing in this webinar, I'm going to take a lot of notes on the sort of nuggets that you're sharing. The point that you finished on, listening more than we speak, I think filters through so many of those different points that you brought up: power dynamics, gender norms, colonialism, colonial legacies, etc. And I'm curious if they'll show up in some of the experiences as I move on to Chelsea. But I just want to encourage anyone else who relates to that, who has navigated some of these similar challenges in their own work, life, volunteering, etc., feel free to share some of those stories in the chat, however you feel comfortable with it. But as I said, I'd like to go to Chelsea next. Similarly, can you just help us understand a little bit of the work that you're doing? So first, maybe start by telling the audience a bit about Engineers Without Borders and your role in Cambodia. And then just in case there's anyone who's interested, can engineers from any discipline apply? How does that work? But then kind of building on that question around challenges. What kinds of challenges did you navigate during your time sort of in a community, especially as a woman? How did you overcome any of these challenges? And then specifically, were there any, Michaela referenced sort of systems, were there any sort of systems from your organization or things, points from your colleagues that helped you with the transition of working in a new community? Over to you, Chelsea.
Sure. Thank you very much. So yes, as you mentioned, I am currently volunteering with Engineers Without Borders Australia in Cambodia. So just in case anyone is interested, when I am referring to Engineers Without Borders, it is the Australian organization. There are other EWB organizations around the world, but they are actually separate organizations. So Engineers Without Borders Australia has a vision of a world where technology benefits all. So they focus on redefining engineering practice as a critical enabler of sustainable development. I've been volunteering with Engineers Without Borders for over 11 years now, actually, mostly in Australia through a range of different programs and initiatives that they have on offer. But the opportunity in Cambodia came about thanks to a partnership between Engineers Without Borders and the Australian Volunteers Program. And the Australian Volunteers Program is an Australian government initiative that connects Australians with our overseas aid program. And yeah, I think it's really nice. Both the Australian Volunteers Program and Engineers Without Borders Australia are really committed to locally led development. And so that's where I've landed here in Cambodia with a local team of engineers who are all Cambodian or Khmer engineers and professional developments. And they are quite a small team, but a very mighty team. There's just 4 in the office, so I make up 5. And my role here is as a WASH technical mentor. So I'm primarily supporting a project within the Sanitation in Challenging Environments program. and we're working to design a water efficient sanitation system for households in rural Cambodia, specifically in areas that are impacted by water scarcity. And it's been a really interesting project, I think, firstly, because I think, like, for me anyway, when we think about water scarcity, there are a lot of like dry sanitation system solutions, but here in Cambodia, we need to develop a water-based solution to align with common practices and community needs and preferences. Um, so yeah, it's definitely been something that I've had to just kind of make sure that I am really leaning into that locally led development, human-centered design, and listening to those community requirements. And it's also, I think, quite interesting because I know that there are other kind of water efficient sanitation solutions out there, but they're at a little bit of a larger scale, whereas we're just really looking at the household scale, like at individual latrines and pits for a single household. So yeah, it's been a really interesting experience and challenge working with the team to see what we can come up with there. So yeah, over my time here, we've been doing like options identification and assessment. We've gone through concept design and incorporating that feedback from community. And then there's been a lot of fun hands-on prototyping as well, including making up some artificial feces to check that the toilet will actually flush properly. And it took a while for us to get to a point where we were having some success, but we are definitely getting there. We're almost there and towards the end of concept design now and getting ready to go back out and test with community. So yeah, lots of fun and definitely very different experience to what I was doing in corporate consulting life in Australia. Um, and so, yeah, here I've been applying my knowledge and experience as someone. So, I've got a background in chemical and environmental engineering, and I've worked in the water industry in Australia for over 9 years. But to that point around different disciplines and things like that, I don't think it's necessarily limited to a certain background or discipline, but the more important part is probably that relevant experience. So like you don't even necessarily need to be an engineer if you've got relevant experience that you can bring and use to kind of to Michaela's point around that capacity building point as well as being in a really important part of the role. So if you've got relevant experience that you can bring, I don't think the discipline or background is so important. And then the second question around challenges, probably some very similar ones to Michaela. For me, the biggest kind of just general challenges definitely around adjusting to a new way of working in a different cultural context, and definitely the language barrier as well. So yeah, in terms of that different working environment, different ways of communicating, it's definitely a slower pace than the fast-paced corporate world I was used to in Australia. But that's not to say it's a bad thing. In fact, I've quite enjoyed slowing down a bit, and it absolutely doesn't mean that things are inefficient at all. Like I said, it is a small team here, the Engineers Without Borders team in Cambodia, but they are absolutely amazing people who are working above and beyond their role descriptions. And I think also there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that I still don't fully understand in terms of making sure we're talking to the right people and following hierarchical processes and things like that. So it's definitely been a good learning experience for me to know that it is good to slow down sometimes. And also it really gives that opportunity to make sure that we are paying attention to community requirements and focusing on that human-centered design as well. And then with the language, I have been doing my best to learn the language. My colleagues have been very supportive, and it's nice to see here that people do appreciate that you are trying. But a new skill for me, I think, has been that I've gotten better at reading body language and expressions to try and kind of interpret what is actually going on in the conversation without understanding the words that are being spoken. So yeah, there are many occasions where I still can at least get the gist of what's going on, and I love some of my colleagues are actually very expressive, and it's quite funny sometimes watching them get really passionate about some of the conversations that they're having. Um, in terms of gender specific challenges, again, probably quite similar to Michaela. Like there are definitely different gender roles here that are more pronounced than perhaps in other countries. So there have been some times where if I've been with a male, it's them who gets addressed rather than me. But I think also acknowledge that there's definitely a difference because I'm a foreign woman and there's different power um, around being a foreigner as well. So I think my experience would be different to a local woman's experience here. But that being said, yeah, I've got a very supportive team here, and I've yeah, never felt any major challenges in terms of that. And I also think that in WASH, there are actually times where being a woman is a benefit. Women are often very involved in different roles and responsibilities when it comes to water. And there's also perhaps some WASH concepts that can be considered women's issues. So women may feel more comfortable to opening up and talking to other women. So there are definitely advantages there in being able to take the lead on gathering those sorts of insights. So yeah, I'm very lucky. Both the Australian Volunteers Program has been very supportive with, pre-departure briefing and providing language lessons and things like that. But even more so, my colleagues at Engineers Without Borders are just, yeah, wonderful people who absolutely welcomed me with open arms and have shared their culture and their knowledge and all sorts of things, their delicious food as well with me. And again, going back to what Michaela said as well, I've absolutely learnt more than I have taught through this experience. Like it is the EWB team are the real stars of the show in this experience. And it's also been really special because the main colleague who I'm working most closely with is also a young woman. So to see her empowered to take the lead on the project that we're working on with the support of her colleagues and from the country manager here in Cambodia, it's really been nice to see that.
Thanks so much, Chelsea. So many interesting reflections there too. I feel like the decision to go and either work or volunteer in a community that is not yours or that is in a culture or language that is so different than yours. I'm sure some people here have made that decision and done that work, but it's a difficult one, right? There's so many things that come into play, whether it's power, identity, privilege. There are so many layers that I appreciate how both of you are starting to unpack. And there are so many reasons why it is still a great idea to go and live, work, volunteer in another community. Maybe it's that you bring highly specialized knowledge that can contribute, et cetera, as you do. But one of the things that I've always found just so incredible is how welcoming people are and people, as you say, when sort of people can reflect your body language, or even if you can't understand the language or you're still learning, I think there is so much just genuine human connection that can happen across difference, across language, across culture. And it's wonderful to hear you making your way in that. I want to turn now to Uyen. I'm so happy that you are here. I'd love to just hear, I'm wondering if you can just share more about your journey as an entrepreneur. Similarly, have you had challenges that you've navigated in the early stages? I'm assuming yes. It's not easy. And maybe also as I mean, so much of this session, this webinar today is really about storytelling. I'm curious about how you are balancing sort of raising a family, running a business. How has that experience been for you, together with volunteering and in different communities? So we'd love to hear your story. Over to you, Uyen.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here and giving me this opportunity. It's a very good question, Anika. Thank you so much for asking me that. Being an entrepreneur, it's very, you need to have a lot of passion, and at the same time, you need to be very patient at the same time. So when I started my startup, I'm a sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm a social entrepreneur. I am a founder of Nimgansha Solar, and what we actually do here is we give services. We install solar, and we work with the communities, underserved communities, um, and try to bring them comfortable life, bringing solar technologies into their life, and make it a better place for them to live, where they don't have to depend on firewood. And um, as you all know, that Bhutan has a very interesting landscape. There's a lot of terrain and mountains, so it's very difficult, and it's very expensive for our government to take all those lines, electrical lines, beyond mountains. And now the electricity has covered most of the part, but there are still underserved communities, in the higher lands. So my startup, works together with those communities, and we try to balance in between hydropower and solar energy. So yeah, like I said, when I started my journey, I started pitching my ideas. So during 2018, it was very popular to become an entrepreneur, and our government agencies were um, promoting entrepreneurship among youths. And me as a student, like a final year student, I did my research on solar highways, and that made me, very interested in solar. And since, when I was doing research on it, I found out that Bhutan was not really new to solar energy, but the gap was, um, there were only foreigners coming here in our country and installing those solar panels, and there weren't actually, solar engineers, and there were lack of knowledge, and our market wasn't aware of it. Whenever I pitch my ideas after pitching in the platforms like Loden Foundations and all, um, um, in the bank, whenever I go to bank and other financial institutions, um, I was always asked, what if there's no sun at all? What if the whole day rains? How are you going to generate energy? And what is the backup plan? So, though solar wasn't a very new concept to Bhutan, but the understanding, the knowledge on solar was very limited. And that is why it was very hard for me to convince the real estate person to go for solar. And water heating system in Bhutan, solar water heating system was very new. Like room heating was also very new. So it was very difficult for me to approach financial institution to start up my business. But when I was getting support, I was advocating first before launching my product and services. So the pandemic hit us very badly in 2019, and like I said, I was always into working with communities, and I was always volunteering. So I also served as a DESOP, and DESOP is known as Guardian of Peace. It's an organization made by His Majesty the Fifth King. And what we actually do here is it's a group of youths. They came together and asked His Majesty to make an organization where we youth can come in the front line to help communities during um, climate disasters and all those like pandemics and all. So during that time I was very we didn't have any work. Everything was locked down, and our like in Bhutan, we were almost like locked down for 1.5 year, I should say, because it was open and it was closed. So it wasn't really open. So most of the time it was closed. So during that time, I served as a frontliner. And when I was serving as a frontliner, I had this beautiful opportunity where I I was in a quarantine duty where His Majesty was there. Um, in that building. So because His Majesty was traveling, advocating people, um, giving advices to people. So before going to his palaces, he used to stay in a quarantine. And during that time I was one of them to in that quarantine duty. So when I was there, we at the end of the quarantine duty, we got a chance to meet with His Majesty. And His Majesty was very, very very, very worried about us, where we didn't have any work, and there were a lot of laid off, like the people who worked in tourism industries. They didn't had any work. So he had this he had this uh, he had this what do we call now, um, like this small initiative where he gave people who didn't had any job during that time. He gave a kind of small stipend or a small salaries to to take care of their families and themselves. So he was saying, was it is it enough for you all? And he was trying to interact with the youth and asking, what do I need to do more to make this our country a better for our future generation. And I didn't know. I'm a very, very shy person, but during that time I had this courage to um, to pitch my ideas. Like I had that, and I think I pitched my ideas in 2 minutes to His Majesty. Like I said, I'm doing a research on it, and I have a small team gathered together who is very passionate to work in solar. And we are trying to do we are trying to get ourselves skilled, and we are trying to bring these services and product to the countries. And His Majesty were he was very interested in what I pitched. And he said, would you be able to submit your ideas, and please submit your CV. And the next day I got called by His Majesty's secretary. And then he said that His Majesty is going to give me an opportunity where I'll be skilled, because during that time I wasn't really, really skilled on field, but I was doing the research part. But I had my team who was electricians, and they had this small knowledge on solar. So His Majesty put in touch with me. Put me in touch with a Canadian solar expert. And from then on, he gave his own land in his palace to build a house, and then put a solar lighting system, water heating system, and room heating system. And I got skilled by the Canadian solar expert. So, and not just me, there were a group of my colleagues who also got skilled there. So it was a life changing experience for me. And then right after that, I wrote a business proposal, and I sent it to the secretary, His Majesty's secretary, and I asked for a fund to start my startup. And the month later I got 1.5 million Neutrum to start my business and launch my product and services. So yeah, it was
Wow. Incredible.
it was a very life-changing opportunity for me, and I'm very thankful that I had this opportunity while serving as a volunteer, and uh, and also get skilled with my colleagues at the same time. And like I said, there were a lot of challenges. Solar comes under technology, and when a woman-led business, there's always a trust issue whether a woman can do better in that field or not. And like I said, when I started my journey as a entrepreneur, like, it was very difficult for me to convince the financial institute to give me that sum of amount where I can launch my product. And being a youth, 21-year-old back then, when I was 21-year-old, the the higher officials always doubt whether you can do it at that age or not. So, but I think I had that courage to wait for the right time. So I did wait. I did had a hard time, like, when all my friends were going out, Bhutan, now everybody, all the youths are like slowly going to Australia to get their masters and all. I was staying back, like my friends were staying back and wanted to do what we were passionate about. So yeah, there were a lot of challenges. Now we're getting through. And I'm a new mother now. I have a 6-month-old baby, so it's challenging for me to be in the office now and to be with her. So yeah, I'm having little difficulties, like I have to stay up late night with my baby to take care of her. I have to go feed her, and I have very little time to be in the office and look after my project and all. But I'm thankful that I have a very supporting family. My mother is always looking after her, and my husband always believes in what I do. So I'm very thankful about it. Yeah.
It sounds like there's such a sort of through line, as you say, of courage and of persistence in your story and in the work that you do, that you have this ability to kind of sit with the discomfort, it sounds like, and sit with the uncertainty and kind of keep putting one foot in front of the other. I personally feel that we all sort of write our own stories and weave our own path in the world. And I don't think we ever know exactly where it's all going. I have yet to
Yeah.
meet anybody of any age who says, yes, I have it all figured out and my plan is going perfectly, right? And so there's this sort of one step in front of the other.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for sharing. I want to get to one of the questions that's been put through in the Q&A box, and amazing. And I'm seeing a couple of other questions coming through. I'll do maybe one more round for all three of you and ask you two questions, one that came through in the Q&A and one that I just have for myself. The question that came through in the Q&A, and I'll start with you, Michaela, is as young women volunteer, what do you think is the most important thing as young women volunteers, what do you think is the most important thing you have brought into the project that ensured gender equality or equity, particularly in the area of water, sanitation, or hygiene? And so, yeah, it's a question about what does equity and equality look like, and particularly in different contexts, different gender norms, as each of you have shared. But then my second question, if you don't mind sort of ending on this, is just, do you have any advice or any message for young people who want to volunteer, who want to serve in different communities? So again, the question about gender equity, and then do you have any advice for anybody out there? Michaela, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think to put it into context, when I arrived here, there were no women in the technical unit that I joined in the local team. So I think just physically being a woman in a space that doesn't have any already creates space for women, which is unfortunate. But it also means that I've been able to like put in my perspective on conversations where I think like there hadn't been consideration of women even as stakeholders, which I think is obviously very easy when you've never lived that experience. And I think it goes for more than just being a woman. It could be other marginalized identities or even just people from different areas than you live in, which can impact a lot. So for us, we're designing water systems for rural communities across very different contexts in Vanuatu. And like everyone doesn't come from the same places we're designing for. So how do we understand that? And I think like there is a good understanding here of designing with communities, but I think as a woman, when we went into communities and we had discussions, it was easier for me to speak to women and to understand their experiences because of the way that the culture works here, where it's not so appropriate for women to speak to men. Um, and I think, I don't know, like there should be women in all engineering teams. I think that's important, because otherwise you miss this whole side of the dynamic. Um, and yeah, I think also like having spoken to these women, I also realized that a lot of these donor models that we're implementing require like 50% quotas for women on water committees, um, for gender equality. But I I think this is controversial, but I don't think that's correct or right. Um, and the reason I say that is because it's grounded in the local context. Um, like we spoke to some women in various communities in the northern province, and they hated the idea of serving on a water committee because that wasn't where like their authority was. And I think it links to one of the questions that came through in the Q&A around like water being sacred and connecting with women and caregiving. I think when we recognize women's authority only when they sit on in a formal role on a formal committee in a formal way that has rules and financing and I don't know, some kind of governance structure, that's the only way we think that their contribution is worthwhile. And I don't think that's correct. So that's what I mean by I don't think it's right that we need 50% of women. I think that gender equality is important, but we need to do it in a contextually appropriate way, which I don't think is a nuance that men necessarily get when they grow up in a culture that tells them that this is how things work. So that was a really long-winded answer to your first bit. I think my advice for young people, I guess is I always thought I had to have everything figured out before I stepped into this kind of work, and that's not true. Most opportunities come before you're ready to say yes. But I think it's important that you do say yes and trust that you will grow through that experience because I have so much. And also, I think it's a lot down to the fact that I've been able to grow this community around me. So say yes and build a community so that you're not doing it alone. Yeah, that's my advice.
Thanks, Michaela. I think that's such good advice, and it connects to something you said in the first round too, which was again just circling back to listening more than you speak. You never know when the right thing is going to fall in your lap, and if you are not paying attention, you might miss it. And you're never going to feel ready. Chelsea, same questions to you as you navigate sort of gender equality or equity in communities, and then any advice you'd have.
I would say, in terms of kind of what role or what I've brought when it comes to gender equality, I've actually been pretty lucky in that sense that I haven't had to work too hard on that. And that's because Engineers Without Borders and the team here, it's already very ingrained in the work that they do. All of their projects and all their engagement with community, they are focusing on making sure that they are equally speaking to and listening to and incorporating perspectives from women as they are with men. And actually, in some cases, we've had community engagement where it's been more engagement with women than men, just because of, again, going to kind of that context specific stuff. It's women who play certain roles, so it is them that we are talking to. And again, also, I mean, it's a small team, but and it is really nice to see that there is one woman in the team here in Engineers Without Borders Cambodia. Um, and like I said before, like her team, the team around her is already empowering her to take the lead on projects. And I think I've just made sure to be conscious of that as well. Provide my inputs and perspectives, but ultimately step back and let her take the lead and make those final decisions and things like that. So yeah, it has been something that I have been conscious of, but like I said, have been lucky to not actually have to work too hard to push any of those kinds of ideas or agendas across. And then yeah, in terms of advice for young water professionals, I love what Michaela said. I would also say that the opportunities rarely, if ever, just fall on your lap. So you do need to put the work in to find the opportunities and build relevant experiences and networks, and get out of your comfort zone to make it happen. So, you know, we have on this panel have experience overseas and with different communities, but you don't necessarily have to go that far. If that is too far out of your comfort zone, or it's just not the right thing for you, or it feels like too big of a jump to go, there are absolutely many other ways that you can serve or take smaller steps towards something bigger. So you can look for those opportunities to volunteer locally, or continue studies or research in a relevant area. You can even apply principles of locally led development in your workplace, whether it's looking at different CSR initiatives or incorporating human-centered design into the work that you're doing. And I also will say to make the most of the opportunities that do exist for youth and young professionals, because I think slowly and definitely more recently, there has been growth in those types of opportunities within the water industry that are focused on getting young people and young professionals involved. And so, I mean, in my role as chair of the Young Water Professionals Steering Committee for IWA, I can't go without saying, have a look at what YWP chapters are in your area and have a think about joining if you're not already. And I think it's a really great network to be part of. And there's lots of other opportunities, like Michaela mentioned, that she's part of the Youth Action for SDG 6 Fellowship, along with others on this call. The IWA also has a leadership program. And there's others. The UN has youth volunteer program, and then there's organizations like World Bank and Asia Development Bank and others that have programs focused at youth. So while you are still in that young professional category, definitely make the most of those opportunities.
Thanks, Chelsea. That's super clear and super helpful. We only have a few minutes left before we hand back to Monica to close us out. So we're answering some of the questions coming through by typing, as I had said, but I want to turn to you, Uyen, and just ask one more time. What is your message to anybody on the call who wants to create an impact through entrepreneurship or service?
Thank you for the question. Um, I don't feel like, I'm on the spot where I can give advices, but then I think I have experienced a lot of upset and success at the same time. So maybe in your, if you are going to take the entrepreneurial journey, maybe it will help you or it will motivate you. So, being an entrepreneur and also serving community as a volunteer, i I always learned that you need to be very disciplined. And when you are when you always volunteer, um, volunteering always means taking responsibility, and and um, you know taking responsibility at the same time. And when you do that, it gives it strengthen your emotional, and it also deepens the connection between you and the community that you are serving. So um, I always feel like as an entrepreneur, it's not just it's not just about making money and making profits, but at the same time, when you can always give it back to the community while making profit. So when you are doing that, i I always think that you should be understanding what kind of problem that you're going to solve in the community. And you should be very rooted to your service and the service that you are going to give it to your communities. So I think that is the most important thing that you should have when 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 you think of becoming an entrepreneur. So yeah.
Thank you. It's such a great connection to what both Chelsea and Michaela had shared. It just reminds me so much of, again, that sort of human-centered design aspect of really thinking about and understanding, seeking to listen, to understand what are the realities and needs of the people that I'm working with, and whether that's in your own community or a community 12 time zones away, it's essential. Thank you three so much for sharing your experiences. We really appreciate it, and I'm impressed and blown away by the work that you do and the way that you think about and articulate the way you're learning and working. I will now step off the stage and hand over to Monica to bring this session to a close. Monica, over to you.
Your stories have highlighted not only the challenges women face on the front line of the water sector, but also the resilience, leadership, and cross-border collaboration. To invite Chelsea to share about a win that is coming soon by the International Water Association.
Thank you. I think the slides are coming back up. Yes, I just wanted to quickly share as part of some other work that I'm involved with the International Water Association as a volunteer there as well. So IWA is working to make women and women's leadership more visible within the water sector, and are particularly looking at doing this at the 2026 World Water Congress in Glasgow later this year. So we are putting together a Women in Water program for the Congress, and in the lead up we'll be delivering a range of webinars. So the first one, which will launch the Women in Water program for Glasgow, is later this week on the 6th of March. And you can see the details on the slide there. So we encourage young water professionals, women professionals, and allies to join us to discuss shared challenges and collaboratively develop collective solutions as we move together towards the Congress in Glasgow. And that's it from me, Monica.
Thank you, Chelsea. As we close this webinar, I also would like all of us to look out for a few more events by the International Water Association. We have the planetary boundaries and absolute sustainability in the water sector. This is coming up. We have the YWP Get Together Career Skills Session 4. This is also coming this March. We have the 20th Leading Edge Conference on Water and Wastewater Technologies. This is happening in June in Houston, Texas. And we have the World Water Congress and Exhibition, the biggest world water event that is happening this year in Glasgow, UK in October 2026. We also have the Digital Water Summit that is happening in Turkey on 24th to 26th November 2026 by the International Water Association. And please use the code on your screen for a 20% discount on IWA membership until 31st December 2026. Thank you everyone who joined us today. On behalf of the International Water Association, we hope these insights continue to inspire action, support, and solidarity for women serving communities across borders. Thank you and have a good day. Thank you, everyone.